Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. We will wait a few more minutes until the top of the hour before we get started. We've got quite a few attendees coming in, so I will just let folks arrive, and then we will get started. Joe, I promoted you to panelist, so you should have the ability to turn your camera on and talk as well.
All right, so you should hear me okay, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Perfect.
and hopefully see me.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Fix this here.
Perfect, perfect. All right. I see a few familiar faces in our attendees and a few new people I don't know yet. So excited to have everyone here.
And everybody has the workbook, Tracy?
Yeah, the workbook was in our registration flow, and I can pull it up and put it in the chat as well, just for in case anyone has it, but they didn't bring it with them.
Yeah, I'll be referencing that throughout the presentation.
Perfect. Okay, we have 1 minute to go. And then I will introduce you, Joe, and we will be on our way.
Okay, great. Are we gonna be letting questions in the chat, Tracy, or?
Yeah, absolutely. If you'd like to, I can hold them until the end, Joe, or I can interrupt you and sort of get them in as we go. What would you prefer?
Well, there's kind of two sections. So if there's stuff about leadership, we can talk about that then. And then at the end, we can talk about the management stuff, if that's
Okay,
all right.
sure. Sounds good. I will sort them accordingly.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll come up as we go through the presentation.
Cool. Okay, we're at the top of the hour, so I will kick us off and introduce our guest today, who is Joe Kozabowski from EOS Worldwide. Joe is a certified implementer. He and I know each other from the moving industry, and Joe has a deep and varied background with the moving industry. He's a seasoned relocation industry executive with over 37 years of experience. He's held numerous executive positions, including roles with Serva, Dependable Auto Shippers, which is now Cars Arrive, and 1-800 Pack Rat Moving and Portable Storage. So he really knows his stuff when it comes to relocations, moving, and storage. He's also has a very extensive entrepreneurial journey. In 2008, he launched a long distance moving division for 1-800 Pack Rat during the Great Recession. And that started from zero, and he grew it to $32 million in 3 years. So, no small feat. It was only after he had done all of these amazing things that then he was introduced to EOS and realized all of the amazing tools that are built into EOS, so entrepreneurial operating system. And if this is your first time learning about EOS, or if you're already familiar with it, I think you are still going to walk away with a ton of tools that you can use for really professionalizing your operations and having a way to fall back on. The title of our talk is having a self-managing business, right? So something that's outside of yourself, because we all know that as busy business owners, there's a lot we need to do, and we need our business to have some tools of its own to run on. So that's what Joe is going to talk about today. Every time I talk to Joe, I walk away with a new inspiration or thing that I am excited to put into play in my business. So I hope the same is true for you. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Joe.
Well, thanks, Tracy. I appreciate that. And thanks for the glowing introduction. And I'm glad you read it just the way I wrote it. So I appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen now so that everybody can see it. And actually, I'm going to flip the presentation so that I can only see it. So let's see here. Let me get this right. So you should see one screen now, right? So you see?
Yes, we do.
Okay, awesome. So today, actually, thanks for the introduction, Tracy. And we're going to be talking about creating a self-managing business. And the idea behind this is I'm going to talk about 5 leadership practices and 5 management practices that allow you to actually create a better structure, lead your team better, and actually create more accountability. And that's kind of the goal. The objectives of today actually is to create kind of a clear understanding of the 6 key components of your business. In EOS, we actually define those, and I'll go through those and kind of give you a little bit more context around those a little bit. But the 6 key components are very important to your business because strengthening them is actually the root of most of the issues within most businesses. The second thing is I want to give you a clear understanding of how to be a better leader, a great leader, and a great manager, right? And I'm going to teach you, we're kind of going to go through a self-assessment. And by doing that, hopefully we'll identify some areas that you need to improve, and obviously identify some things that may need to be addressed within your business. The third thing is actually give you some practical tools. I'm going to share a lot of EOS tools with you today. Obviously, they're in the workbooks that has been provided, and actually, these are things that you can actually start using right away to improve your business. So, the agenda for today is kind of understanding what you want from your business, right? So, I'm going to ask you a tough question. I'm then going to go through the 5 frustrations of a business owner. I'm then going to talk about the 6 key components of EOS. So you kind of get a sense of those 6 key components that need to be strengthened to improve your business. And then I'm going to actually go through the 5 leadership practices. And this is where we're actually going to do an assessment. So today is about testing you a little bit and kind of giving you a kind of a reflection, a self-reflection of how you deal with leadership. And then obviously the 5 management practices, which is actually allowing you to assess yourself as a manager as well. The idea there is that there is a distinct difference between leadership and management, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a good understanding of what those are. We'll conclude hopefully within the hour with next steps and conclude to kind of give you some next steps and things that you can actually take back and implement within your business. So the question is, as business owners and business leaders, what do you want from your business, right? And that's a tough question because most people don't most people don't think about that. So what do you want from your business? Do you want, in this case, a very honed in Honda NASCAR kind of grass cutting tool? Or do you really want something that actually doesn't cut grass at all, but gives you the illusion that it's cutting grass, which is the little kids walk behind mower that actually blows bubbles, right? So what do you want? Do you want the high powered, NASCAR, cutting gas cutting, or do you want something that doesn't cut grass at all? So looking at the 5 frustrations, and this is actually page 1 of your workbook. There are 5 frustrations of a business owner. The first one is control. And this is either where the owner has lost control of their business or the business is controlling them. And I'm saying their time and energy, right? So at the end of the day, this is consuming their time and energy in that process. The second one is actually profit. And to be fair, this is the lack of profits within your business, right? Most owners want to invest in their people, technology, and their infrastructure, and maybe trucks. At the end of the day, if you don't have profitability, it's hard to invest in all those things. The third is people. And this is really about frustration about managing people. And we'll talk a little bit about how to improve that. But this is really about understanding that it's difficult dealing with people. Do you have the right people in the right seats? Are they capable of doing the job? Do you have to self-manage them? All that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, and I'll talk about this, if you've hired somebody and you have to manage them, you've actually made a bad hire, right? We need to talk through that. The fourth frustration is hitting the ceiling. It's really early. It's really easy in early stage businesses to kind of double, triple your revenues. And then obviously at some point you're going to hit the ceiling. Now, the idea here is that it takes practice, it takes skill to break through the ceiling. You either break through it, you stagnate, or you go out of business. I've talked to a lot of movers who have stagnated, right? They're at 10 million or they're at 12 million for the last couple of years. And the idea there is it takes skill to break through the ceiling. Unfortunately, the rule is that 50% of business after 5 years go out of business because they don't know how to break through the ceiling. So it's very important. The fifth one is nothing's working. This is where the owner knows that there's problems, knows that there's issues within their business. They're trying new things. They may have read a book, hired a consultant, went to a seminar, but they're trying new things, but nothing's moving the needle because they just don't have a handle as to what actually is causing the issue. And again, those are the five frustrations. The reason I talk about those is that those you may be experiencing some of them, all of them, maybe just one of them. But the idea there is that these are things that actually are controllable, right? And the idea there is that hopefully I'll teach you some things that actually allow you to control those. So the next piece of this is that I'm going to go through the EOS model. And it stems from a discovery that it actually talks about your business it being in the middle of it. And it stems from a discovery that most business owners wrestle with about 136 issues simultaneously as they run their businesses. And what I'm going to do is kind of go through the model and kind of give you a sense of what it is. And I'm going to kind of go through it very quickly, but I want to get you a sense of what's going on. So the vision component is the first key component. This is really about where you're going, how you're going to get there. And what I'm going to talk about is two tools and disciplines that actually strengthen that in a little bit. The second one is the people component. And quite honestly, you can't execute a great vision without great people, but every company defines great people differently, right? So you got to really understand what separates your people, what creates your culture, things like that. And what I'll talk about a little bit is actually how we actually get the right people in the right seats. The third one is the data component. This is really about running your business on facts and figures versus feelings, egos, or subjective emotions, right? Which often drive a lot of entrepreneurial businesses. And what I want to do is talk about data, right? Because data actually needs to drive decisions. Now, when your vision, people, and data component are strong, that leads me to my fourth key component, which is the issues component. Every great company out there is really good about solving their issues, teeing them up, understanding their issues, and teeing them up and solving them at the root to make sure they go away forever. And that's what separates good companies and bad companies. The fifth key component is the process component. And this is really about taking the most important things in your business and make sure that they're done the same way every time. It allows you to scale your business, allows you to manage it more effectively, hopefully actually make more money, and actually have more fun managing the business, right? And I'll talk about the tools and disciplines we actually create to actually increase that process component. The last and final key component is the traction component. This is really about bringing that vision down to the ground and gaining traction on a day in, day out basis. There's no coincidence that vision's at the top and traction at the bottom, because vision without traction is actually hallucination. And now what we do is on the journey together, we're actually going to typically measure our success on a very subjective but scientific scale of 0 to 100% strong. Knowing that getting to 100% strong in each of the six key components is kind of utopia, our goal is actually just to get to 80% strong in each of the six key components, knowing that most companies are about 20% strong, successful in spite of a lot of shortcomings. Now, I'm going to quickly talk about the two tools and disciplines we teach in each of the six key components. Now, look at it, and this is on page 2. The vision component is really about alignment on 8 questions, and I'll talk about what that is. That's the vision traction organizer. And it's about core values, the core focus, your 10-year target, your marketing strategy, your 3-year picture, your 1-year plan, your quarterly rocks, and your issues list. The one thing about EOS is about engagement. And one of the things that I want to call attention to is that disengagement is a real thing within businesses. Gallup says that 69% of employees are disengaged. And if you look at the cost of disengagement, that's 34%. Looking at $1 million of payroll, that's $240,000 per year of $1 million of payroll that's lost due to disengagement. If you add a little turnover to that, conservatively 15%, that's $390,000 of annual loss. The idea behind getting a common vision and then having it shared by all is about getting engagement, getting everybody to understand how they play a role in actually the company succeeding and how they fit into the success of the organization long term. So that's the vision component, having a clear vision, everybody on the same page, and having it shared by all. And not to get all kumbaya in here, but if you get everybody rowing in the same direction, companies achieve things that they never thought were possible in their business. So that's the vision component. The people component is about right people, right seats. And that's a term that was coined by Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great. And the idea there is that you have to have the right people in the right seats. And the idea there is that right people are people that fit your culture. The right seats are actually people that actually have the God-given talent to do the seat that they're in. And they have to GWC their seat. And we'll talk about what GWC is in a little bit. The third key component is a data component, and this is about running your business on facts and figures. And actually, we created a scorecard. A scorecard is a leading indicator, activity-based scorecard. So it's not looking at the rearview mirror. This is looking at through the windshield. What activities do we need to do? And the second part of that is that everybody should have measurables. Everybody should know what they need to do when they come into work to actually help the company succeed. The fourth key component, again, when your vision, people, data component are strong, all your impurities, imperfections, and challenges become really transparent, right? They become really unknown to the company, and they elicit opportunities to change. That actually takes us to our fourth key component, which is the issues component. The good thing here is that there's only been 23 major issues in the history of business. You just have to get really good about identifying them, teeing them up, and knocking them down to make sure they go away forever. The goal here is actually creating a culture around the issues list. The only thing that I can tell you is that if you don't resolve your issues, you're never going to move forward. And becoming transparent about your issues and creating that culture around issues is extremely important. The other thing is that every team and every department should have their own issues list so that all the issues throughout the entire company are documented. Then the key there is that effectively what we call IDSing, which is actually an issue solving track that we created that allow you to identify the root of the issue, discuss the possible solutions, and then solve that issue to make sure it goes away forever. The bad thing here is that most companies solve the symptom and they never solve the root of it. And they're solving the same issues over and over and over again. And what that does is that demoralizes the company. And the one thing I can tell you is that taking swift action, having those tough conversations is so important because a small issue, that goes unaddressed can actually balloon into a really big issue at some point, right? The fifth key component is that process component. And this is about documenting and simplifying your handful of core processes, right? This is about taking those and using what we call the 20-80 rule. What are the 20% of the major steps that get you 80% of the way there? Once you document them and simplify them, anybody who touches those has to follow those procedures, right? They have to follow that process. And the only way that's going to happen is by training them, measuring them, and then holding them accountable to what you've measured them. So this needs to find its way into the scorecard. Many of my clients have their process documented, but they don't have any scorecard metrics to support that they're being done. Whether it's a compliance issue, whether it's a results oriented, or whether it's just frequency, right? So what is the what? So that needs to find its way into the data component. The sixth component is that tracks component. And this is about creating a 90-day world for the company to live in. This is where everybody gets rocks. And we're creating a 90-day world that kind of looks like this, where you're running real hard in your business. You want to come up for air, look back how you did on the last quarter, learn from your mistakes, reset your vision, make sure you're all on the same page. Then set rocks for the next quarter, then go back in the business and execute. That's the cadence that we want to create for the entire company. Not just the leadership team, but the entire company. And then lastly, we want everybody being in a meeting pulse. And we call that the level 10 meeting. And it's probably one of the most important meetings, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But being in a meeting pulse allows you to stay connected, allows you to create discipline and accountability on that vision. It allows you to review the scorecard. It also allows you then to have time to actually solve issues and solve issues at the root to make sure they go away forever. So that's the EOS model. That's on page 2. And the idea there is that those components or those 10 things that I talk about are 10 of the tools that we teach that allow you to strengthen those 6 key components, right? And ideally, all we want to do is get to 80% strong in each of those 6 key components. So the next section here is talking about LMA. So LMA is actually an equation. So leadership plus management equals accountability. Okay. And if you look at this, and this is a quote by Gino Wickman, accountability is the glue that bonds commitment to results. Okay. And the idea here is that there are 1,000 books that you can read on the subject of leadership and management. What we're going to do is we're going to boil it down to 5, kind of get you to the nuts and bolts of it and kind of boil down to what actually makes you a good leader and a good manager. And ideally, it's these 5 things. And you can see here, leadership, which is the left side, is working on your business, providing clear direction, creating the opening, initiative, and thinking. Management, on the other hand, is working in the business. It's clear expectations, it's communication, it's follow through, it's doing. If you look at those 2 distinct differences, leadership on the business, management in the business, very different things. The thing here is that you can be a good manager, but not a good leader, and vice versa. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you're a good leader, you're going to be a good manager, and vice versa. The idea here is that your style really doesn't matter in this case. If you look at it, your style, and I'll talk about this a little bit. This is a quote from Jim Collins. Our job as leaders and managers is creating an environment where accountable people thrive. Okay. Again, if your whole team was accountable to themselves and accountable to what they're there to do for the business, that's where you're going to thrive. Now, again, your style doesn't matter in this process. You could be a drill sergeant or it could be a nurturer. It doesn't really matter. The goal here is that there's two non-negotiables in this whole process. The first one is you must generally care about your people. Okay, and I can't change that, right? That's something that's innate in you. The second one is you must want to be great. Okay. And the idea there is that if you, again, learning, always becoming better, that's the desire that we want to actually create, is that this is something that it's not something you have, it's something that you build and something you maintain by actually continuing to want to be good. So what I'm going to do now is break down the five leadership practices. And what I'm going to do is this is actually a self-assessment. If you turn to page five, I think it's page five of your workbook. No, page three, I'm sorry. This is actually the leadership practices. And what I'm going to do is I want you in the upper right-hand corner, I want you to write down how many direct reports you have. So if it's five direct reports, I want you to write that number there. And what I want you to understand that this is a all or nothing type of assessment. If you're doing this or doing these things with four of your five direct reports, that really means that you're not doing it with all five. Okay, so this is an assessment. Now, one of the things I want to caution you with is that it's common for this assessment to have some no's in it and some yeses, more no's than yeses. So don't get discouraged as we go through this. The idea here is that this whole point is actually allowing you to understand where you need to focus your energy and attention to get better. Okay. So the first question of this assessment, and I want you to take this assessment with me, is that I'm providing clear direction. Okay. And the idea here is that the first part of this is creating an opening. And if you've ever heard the adage, nature abhors a vacuum, the idea here is that if you create an opening, nature will run into it. So if you think of it this way, if you were to take a cup of water and you were to pour it out, that cup would actually be filled with air. That air is the nature that actually fills that void and fills that cavity. The idea here is that the accountability seat within your organization is what creates the opportunity, right? The idea here is that that's their role in the company, and that's what creates the opening for a clear direction. The second part of that is a compelling vision. Okay, and the compelling vision is actually the idea of what we call the VTO, which is actually going to be something we're going to talk about. The VTO is the Vision Traction Organizer. And if you turn to page five of your workbook, the workbook shows that page five is the vision side of the document, which is the core values, your core focus, your 10-year target, your marketing strategy, your three-year picture. Again, core values, who you are at the core. It identifies and creates your culture when you surround yourself with people that have those core values. The core focus is your sweet spot. It's kind of like your barometer to understand that, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is where the purpose, passion, and cause intersects with your niche. The 10-year target is what you want long term from your business, right? Again, the idea behind the 10-year target is it's the beacon by which you make a lot of decisions in your first couple of years. Because you can't start your 10-year target in year nine. You got to start in years one, two, and three. The marketing strategy is simply what's your target market, three uniques, your proven process, and your guarantee that allow you to actually market and actually target the right people and sell what you're actually best at. So again, target market, it's your demographic, geographic, and psychographic nature of your ideal client. The three uniques is actually what separates you from your competition. The best modern day example of the three uniques is probably Southwest Airlines, which is low fares, lots of flights, and lots of fun. They're the only airline that can say those three things. That's what creates the difference in what they are in the marketplace. The proven process, you've heard the adage, it's easier to show somebody something than it is to tell them. This is about having a proven process, which is a visual that starts out by saying, hey, this is when you start the relationship with us as a client, and this is what it looks like when you're a long-term client of ours. And the guarantee, quite simply, is what are you going to do or say to remove any objection or concern of wanting to do business with you, right? They get the more yeses. The fifth question in the vision side is then what's your three-year picture? So what does the company look like 3 short years from now on its way to the 10-year target? The goal here is that this is actually looking at what are the revenue, profits, and measurables for that 3-year picture, but then what does the company look like? As we walk the halls of your business, how many locations do you have? How many trucks do you have? You may be in a different warehouse. You may be in a different, marketplace. All those kind of things. You may add a different product line, right? At the end of the day. So that's what it is that what does it look like? So as you walk the halls of your business, what does it look like? I had a client a couple of weeks ago that basically added a flight simulator, not a flight simulator, a NASCAR simulator and a golf simulator into their break room. And that was something they wanted to add for their people to actually have access to having fun things on site as they worked, which is great. Again, that's the vision side. Page 6 of your workbook shows the traction side of the document, which is what's your 1-year plan that's going to get us to that 3-year picture on its way to the 10-year target, which is going to be revenue, profits, and measurables. And then we're going to set 3 to 7 goals for the company, not 23. EOS has a saying that less is more, right? So the idea here is that less is more. And what we want to do in this process is that we want to make sure that we're laser focused on what we want to accomplish. The seventh question then is what's the rocks? Rocks are going to be things that allow you to get things done within the next 90 days that actually get you closer to finishing your goals for the year. And rocks are actually important, and it's an analogy that Stephen Covey had that if you had a cylinder, which is your time, rocks are your big priorities for your business. Pebbles are your daily priorities. Sand is your interruptions. Water is everything else. Most people put the water in first, the sand in second, the pebbles in third. There's no room for the rocks. The goal is to flip the script here and say the rocks going first, the pebbles then sift in between the rocks, the sand sift in between the rocks and the pebbles, and then the water then sifts in on top. So the idea here is that everybody has the capacity. It's about where you spend your time and energy and focus and attention. And the last question is then, what's your issues list? And the issues list is kind of what's holding you back, what's slowing you down, and what's ticking you off. What are the things that are actually in your way from success, right? And the only way that you're going to be successful is by removing those impediments. And those are issues that you need to address. A small issue can result in a big issue if it goes unaddressed. Okay. So that's the VTO. That's pages 5 and 6. And the idea here is that do they see it? Hold on. Okay. Do they see it? Right. And the question is, if they see it, do they want it? Hold on. That okay. Do they see it? Okay. So the question now is that take the self-assessment and answer yes or no. Am I giving clear direction? And I'll give you a second or two to do that. So the second question of this leadership self-assessment is providing the necessary tools. So that now that you've created the opening, are you providing the right tools and support they need to be successful in their seat? So the idea here is that if you created the opening and you don't give them the right tools, what that's going to do is it's going to be really debilitating to them, right? You're not giving them the tools for them to be successful. And I'm talking about resources, training, technology, people, and then obviously time and attention. I'm talking about your time and attention, right? And that's what's important. So again, once you give them and create the opening and give them clear direction, then giving them all the tools to be successful. And again, this is some self-reflection, looking in the mirror. And again, take a minute, say, am I providing the necessary tools, yes or no? And again, it's an all or nothing. So if you have 5 direct reports and you're only doing it for 4 of them, that means it's a no. So the third question then is then I am letting go of the vine. And now that you've created the opening and provided the necessary tools, are you getting the heck out of the way and letting them do their job? There's a book by Ken Blanchard called The 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey, which is a great illustration of a manager that just doesn't want to let go, right? They want to basically be responsible for it. So this is when everybody in the company is coming to this manager with all their problems, right? They're coming to them with their issues and their problems and their challenges. And what that is those are monkeys. And what they're doing is they're coming into your office, and what happened is that they're talking about their monkey, And the hopes is that their goal is to leave the monkey with you. And if you don't let go of the vine, they're going to continue to come into your office and leave the monkey with you. At the end of the day, you're going to have 20 freaking monkeys back in your office. And if you take the monkey, you got to feed the monkey. Okay. So the goal here is that don't take the monkey. So let go of the vine. And the goal here is that by letting go of the vine, this is actually a tool that we teach called Delegate and Elevate, which is actually going to be on page 7 of your workbook. And the goal behind Delegate and Elevate and GWC is the goal with Delegate and Elevate is to identify what you're working on. So the idea here is that you determine your ideal work week. Yeah, obviously we're in the movie business. In the summer, it may be 80 hours. In the off season, it may be 50 or 60. But the idea there is that you set your ideal work week. The idea here is that once you identify all the activities, you then want to put them into the 4 quadrants. So the top left quadrant is things you love to do that you're great at, which is really good. That's where you want to be most of the time. The upper right-hand quadrant is things you don't like to do that you've gotten good at, which is great, or things you like to do that you're good at. The bottom left-hand quadrant is things you don't like to do but you've gotten good at, which you need to offload. And the bottom right-hand quadrant is things you don't like to do that you're not good at. The problem is that most people, and 95% of people go to die in that bottom left-hand quadrant, which is things you don't like to do that you've gotten good at. Okay. And the idea there is that a lot of people over time have gotten good at doing those things. And the importance there is that you've gotten good at them, but the idea there is that it's taking your time away from elevating to things you love to do that you're great at, which is better for the company, right? So the idea there is that you want to make sure you're looking at it from a lens from the company perspective. Most people think that the bottom left-hand quadrant is what protects their job. And the idea there is that they think that that's job protection, that's busy work. Unfortunately, as a leader, you need to be in the upper 2 quadrants. The idea there is that, and I'm not talking about giving it to somebody that doesn't love to do it. You want to find somebody that loves to do it, they're great at it. Also, do the check. If you're doing something that doesn't provide value to the company, stop doing it, right? At the end of the day, or automate it. The goal here is that there are things that people do and there's reports that people create that nobody looks at. Nobody takes advantage of. Nobody makes any decisions with that data. If that's the case, stop doing it because it's actually just wasting your time. The second thing is right seats. We introduced a concept here, which is on page 8, called GWC. GWC is that they get it, they want it or wants it, and the capacity to do it. The getting it is that they actually have the innate ability to do it, right? They're hardwired that way, right? The wanting is that they get up every day wanting it. You can't pay them or coach them to want it. And then the third one is the capacity, which is going to be the acquired skills. And again, it's going to be the training, certification, experience, and the relationships to do that job well. It has to be wise for all three of those, right? At the end of the day, they have to get it, they have to want it, and the capacity to do their seat, right? And ideally, there's one caveat here. There's one disclaimer. You can't offload stuff to people that they don't GWC their seat, which means that you have to fix those problems first in order to then offload those bottom 2 quadrants to people that actually can do the job that you're asking them to do. Okay. Again, this is just a simple scene for Wayne Gretzky. He's a center in the NHL, wins faceoffs, creates scoring chances, scores goals, back checks and defends, which I think is probably something that he didn't do very well, but minimizes turnovers, right? That's what great Wayne Gretzky GWC's that seat. Okay. So the question is, am I letting go of the vine? Yes or no? And I'll let you decide if it's yes or no. Again, all or nothing. If you're doing it for all your direct reports, it's a yes. If not, it's a no. So the fourth question then in the assessment is I act with the greater good in mind. Okay. And this is something that I drill into my clients and I put up in every session room what I call GGOTO, which is the greater good of the organization. And this is really about understanding that the idea here is that every decision that you make within your business should be for the greater good of the organization, not any person or any one individual within the company. Okay. And ideally, there's a couple things here. So the company's vision, right, which is once that vision's clear, that's the greater good, right? Your actions, are they in line with the greater good, right? Making sure that your actions are in line with what actually that VTO or what that company vision is. Your decisions, are they for the greater good of the company, right? No job protecting, no job politicking, right? No politicking there, right? The decisions are for the greater good, not for my benefit. Are you walking the talk? This is actually lead by example. As you go, so will they, is kind of our mantra, right? So as you go as a leader, so goes the rest of your organization, right? Everybody will follow through and follow step. And the last one is company needs come first. At the end of the day, this is the greater good, right? The company, not one individual. So I'll let you take the assessment. Yes or no, am I acting with the greater good in mind? So the last and final question of this leadership assessment is, am I taking clarity breaks? Okay. And the goal here is that this is actually where you work on your business. This is where you create clarity in your mind. You protect your confidence. It can be daily, weekly, or monthly. And if you don't know how to do this, if you look at page 9 of your workbook, there's a little bit of a kind of a little bit of a tutorial on how to do a clarity break. The goal here is that it also has some questions that you can ask yourself. The biggest thing is just take a blank legal pad of paper and a pen and make sure that you protect your time here. Don't do it in the office. Do it outside the office. Don't go to a coffee shop. Maybe go to a library, someplace quiet. But the idea is that this actually restores your confidence. It gives you clarity about what you need to work on to improve your business. The idea there is that if you spend all your time in your business and spend little precious time on your business, you're actually never going to move your business forward. It's actually, you're not going to have clarity around what that looks like and how to get there. So if you look at this, this is actually the page 9, which is the clarity break kind of tutorial. It kind of gives you some questions to ask yourself when you're doing it. Again, make sure that you're protecting your confidence. You decide if it's daily, weekly, or monthly. Gino Wickman, who's the founder of EOS, does it daily. I do it monthly. I also do it when I'm dealing with a tough issue, or whether it be with a client or internally with my own practice. Okay. Again, the idea there is that you actually gain clarity about a specific situation or a specific challenge that you have within your business. So the question here is that this is actually a Zen proverb. You should set meditation for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should sit for at least an hour. Okay, the idea here is that most leaders, and this is actually a quote by Henry Ford, thinking is the hardest work there is, which is probably the reason why so few engage in it. Right? That's the problem is that as leaders, we need to have clarity about our direction, what we need to do moving forward. And that clarity breaks allow you to actually get out of the noise, get out of the day to day, and actually have that understanding of what actually needs to get done. I would encourage you to, after this session, is if you haven't taken a clarity break, is to take out your phone and actually set up your first clarity break within the next week or so, because it's so important. So, am I taking clarity breaks? Yes or no? Take the self-assessment. And again, if it's all or nothing, if you're doing it for four, if you're not doing it, obviously it's a no. But the idea there is that if you are doing that and actually getting and working on your business, that's awesome. So again, yes or no. So look at this assessment. The goal here is that hopefully I've given you some tools and tips how to turn those no's into yeses. And if you need more help with those, feel free to reach out to me. I'll provide my contact information at the very end. But ideally, the goal here is to get to all yeses. And the idea there is that these are 5 simple things. If you do these things, these actually allow you to become a better leader. And again, going back to what we talked about, leadership is working on the business, giving clear direction, creating the opening, creating initiative, and thinking about where you want to go long term, right, in the business. Now we're going to transition into the M part of it, which is the management side of it. And that's really about working in your business. And working in your business is really, what you do day to day. And the goal here is it's providing clear direction, communication, follow through, and doing. Most managers feel their job is to actually tell people what to do. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit because ideally, if you got to tell people what to do all the time, you don't really need them, right? At the end of the day, you want them to know their job and actually get out of the way and do their job effectively. So we often get asked this question, and I'm going to talk about the 5 leadership practices here in a bit. Is that how often I often get asked, how do I hold my people accountable? And the goal, the answer to that is you can't. Holding people accountable isn't something you do to people. It's a byproduct of doing 5 things well as a manager, right? And the idea here of going through this 5 management practices is to kind of give you an understanding of that and ideally how to basically understand if you are a good manager, and if you're not, what do you need to do to actually get to become a good manager? Again, this is a quote from Jim Collins. The moment you feel like you have to tightly manage somebody, is you made a hiring mistake. Okay, so if you have to tightly manage somebody, that means that they're not willing to take initiative. They're not willing to actually take their role and run with it. But and again, sometimes you have to self-reflect and look in the mirror. Are you giving them all the tools to do it? Things like that. So again, you got to make sure you're doing it. If you turn to page 11, which is just self-assessment for management, what I'm going to do now is go through this self-assessment. Again, your style doesn't matter. Again, but two non-negotiables, right? You gotta generally care about your people, and actually you want to be great. So those are the two non-negotiables. Again, if you have five direct reports, it's an all or nothing question. If you're doing it for all five, it's a yes. If you're doing it for four of the five, it's a no. Okay. So the first question is, I keep expectations clear. Okay. And ideally, this is a two-way stream, mine and theirs. They understand your expectations and you understand theirs, right? So it's a two-way street. And by keeping expectations simple, what we're going to do is we're actually going to talk about what that really means. And there's four things here. So the role is actually their seat, right? And if they GWC their seat, they understand their role, they understand what they're there to do for the company. Core values are actually what the guiding tenets of your business are. So at the end of the day, what are those core values and how do they are they eliciting those? If they're not living up to your expectations of what you want from them as an employee. Rocks, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, is that rocks allow you to actually understand, that they're getting things accomplished that move the needle forward. And measurables is actually what holds them accountable to what they're there to do for the business. Now, the one thing about great managers, they don't fire people. What happens is that they make sure the role is clear. They understand the core values, they understand their rocks, they understand their measurables, they understand their scorecard. And if they're not meeting those, they actually end up quitting. And the idea here is that in most cases, and I see this with a lot of my clients, is that they hire a person, they have certain expectations of that role, and they continue to modify that expectation of the role based upon the person that's in that role. Unfortunately, that does not move the company forward. And what I'm going to do is talk about each of these four things and kind of give you a little more context. So again, the role is the right seats, which again, they have to GWC their seat. They have to get it, want it, have the capacity to do it. And again, this is the Wayne Gretzky. They win faceoffs, create scoring chances, score goals, back check and defend, and minimize turnovers. The second one is the core values, right? This defines who you are at the core. It's what you want from your culture of the organization. It attracts the right people and repels the wrong people. And ideally, what you want to do is make sure that you're always looking at your core values and make sure that the people around you exude those core values. The third one is rocks. Again, this is the 90-day world that we're trying to create for the company. Everybody has 3 to 7 business priorities, company and individual. What this does, though, is it creates discipline. It creates discipline, focus, and accountability towards what are priorities for the business to move forward. And the idea there is that this is something that's reported on every week in the level 10 meeting. So it creates peer-to-peer accountability and discipline that forces change within the business, right? This is really what that's about. And then the fourth one is, and this is page 15, which is the scorecard. The scorecard is actually the measurables which hold them accountable to what they're there to do for the business. And ideally, these are activity-based scorecards and they're measured weekly. The idea about measuring them weekly is that it allows you to see what's working and what's not working. If something's not working, you got to IDS it and make sure you get it back on track. So the first question in the management of self-assessment is, I keep expectations clear. So answer that question, yes or no. All right. So the second question of the management self-assessment is, I am communicating well. And the idea here is that this is me and them. It's a two-way street, right? Ideally, what you want to do is get to a situation where you're doing less of the talking and they're doing more of the talking. You should be talking 20% of the time as manager, and they should be talking 80% of the time. Let them sell themselves on it. Okay. Um, one of the things that happens is that you want to know what's on their mind, no assumptions. So if you say something to somebody and they give you that look, what you want to do is you want to address it right away and say, why the look? What's going on? If they roll their eyes, why are they doing that? Ask them why they're rolling their eyes. Don't just assume that you know why they're rolling their eyes and why they're actually giving you that look. Ask the question. The third one is two emotions. When you see that there's a problem, say, hey, what, I see there's something going on here. I'm going to give you a good and a bad thing that's going on. You can give me a good, we're going to go back and forth until we resolve the issue. The other thing is that the statement to question ratio. You must monitor this, right? And again, move from telling to having them understand their role so they understand exactly where they're going. Again, you should be talking 20% of the time, they should be talking 80% of the time. Let them sell themselves on what needs to get done. Ideally, another part of this, I like to use the word another tool called echoing, which is when you tell somebody to do something and you give them like a direction, say, "Hey, I just told you a lot of things here. Why don't you repeat what I just told you so I understand exactly that you have what you get what I told you to do." You can also use that in reverse when you have an employee that comes to you and tells you something. You can say, "You know what? You just unpacked a lot of stuff. Let me repeat what I thought I heard so that we're on the same page." Again, that's called echoing. And then if you turn, this is actually an interesting situation here. This is a kind of a little understanding of what's going on from a communication perspective. So between what I think, what I want to say, what I believe I am saying, what I say, what you want to hear, what you hear, what you believe you understand, what you want to understand, and what you understood, there are at least nine possibilities of misunderstanding there, right? So one of the things about echoing and doing these things is really important. That allows you to make sure that you're on the same page and you're communicating well. So make sure that you're doing that. Now, one little thing here is that if you think LMA is leave me alone, something's gone horribly wrong in my presentation here today. But ideally, LMA is leadership plus management equals accountability, not leave me alone. Okay. So the second question I want you to answer yes or no. Am I communicating well? Yes or no? All right. So the next question is I have the right meeting polls. Okay. And ideally, this is an even exchange of dialogue, right? The idea here is that if you're running the meetings and you're doing all the talking, that really means that you're the one driving the train versus the employees or your team driving the train. You want to flip that script. Okay. You also want to make sure that you're reporting measurables, again, which is page 15. Again, it's a scorecard. And again, that actually is you want to make sure that again everybody has a measurable and everybody understands how they fit into the success of the organization. And the idea here is that this also allows you to keep your circles connected. And ideally, if you look at this next slide, if you're having too many meetings, you're kind of on top of each other. The bottom one here says that you're not talking enough, right? The bad things are going to happen. The goal of an EOS company is to have a level 10 meeting that allows your circles to stay just connected to where you're actually not smothering yourself. And actually, it also creates one-on-ones are when necessary, not every week, right? So at the end of the day, you're creating an opportunity to keep your circles connected without basically smothering yourself and obviously not allowing you to grow, things like that. So the question is, again, the third question is, I'm having the right meeting pulse, yes or no? Again, all or nothing. If you're doing it for four of them and not all five, it's a no. If you're doing it for all five, it's a yes. So the next question, the fourth question is, I'm having quarterly one-on-one conversations. And ideally, we call this the 555 or quarterly conversations. And if you turn to page 16 of your workbook, this talks about what quarterly conversations look like. And again, these are not performance reviews. These are just having quarterly conversations with your employees. And really what we're trying to do is actually allow us to take three things. What's the core values of your business? What's the rocks that they have for the business? And then what is their role? What is their seat? That allows you to have a great conversation about their role and what they're doing. And the idea here is that I've given you on page 17 and 18, I've given you a number of tidbits and tools that you can use to make yourself have a great quarterly conversation. And the idea here is that this is really about understanding what you want from them, making sure they're on the same page, make sure they still want their job, and make sure that they're living up to the core values of the business, right? If they're not, that's okay. You just need to say what's going on, what's forcing you not to live up to the core values. If it's persistent, you may need to take action. So again, page 17 and 18 allows you to basically get some great communication. And the idea here is that you're also using this to get feedback on yourself. What could you do better? What issues do they have with you that you can change and resolve? So accepting feedback. So again, step one is what's working. Step two, what's not working, right? What's holding us back? What's slowing us down? What's not right? You become curious about those things, and it may be tough to get through those things, but the idea there is that that's what's holding us back. Again, use that 80-20 rule. They should be talking 80%. You should be listening. Step three is what are the next steps? How are we going to resolve these situations? Again, these are issues. If you ask them for issues and you don't resolve them and don't take care of them, they're never going to come to you with issues. They're going to stop talking to you about issues. And then the fourth step is accepting feedback. What's holding, what could you do better? What's holding, what can you improve to actually make their job easier? What's the one thing that you can do that actually helps improve their relationship? Things like that. So the idea there is that you want to use that to actually not only get information, but again, this should be off, not in the building. It should be, very casual. It doesn't replace performance reviews. This is all about understanding what needs to happen, what needs to improve to actually understand what needs to get better within the company to get them more successful in their role. The second part of this is then they can do the people analyzer on themselves, right? This is where they come to the meeting, the quarterly conversation, they go through the people analyzer, which is essentially they rate themselves against the core values, right? If they exist, if they've listed it most of the time, it's a plus. Sometimes and all the time, it's a plus minus. If most of the time they don't list that core value, it's a minus. Again, if you do it on them and they do it on themselves, that creates a great conversation item within that quarterly conversation. So a great boss creates a work environment where people are fully engaged and highly accountable. Again, we're talking about that in disengagement. If you can get everybody engaged in their job, what that does is that removes that impediment of disengagement, which is a high cost. Okay. So the second thing here, or the fourth question then is I'm having quarterly conversations, yes or no, again, all or nothing, and you can actually put in your response. Again, if you're doing it for four of them, it's a no. If you have five direct reports, if you're doing it for all five, it's a yes. So the last question here is I am rewarding and recognizing. Okay. And the idea behind this is that you want to make sure that you want to reward and give feedback very quickly, both positive and negative, right? The idea there is that you want to do it within 24 hours. Um, you then want to make sure that you criticize in private, praise in public. Okay. The idea here is that if you have an issue with somebody, they've done something wrong, make sure that you're having a private conversation. Praise in public. For those of you that have a lot of Gen Z employees, Gen Zs tend to work in packs. Praise in public is a challenging thing for one person of that pack. So just be mindful of that as you navigate that. The third part of this is be their boss, not their buddy, right? At the end of the day, you're their boss, not their buddy. And then we also look at what we call the three strike rule. And I've given you, this is on page 20 of your workbook. And ideally, if you're having issues, the best thing to do is have a conversation with them, have a three strike conversation with them. The first is that you want to make sure that they understand what their expectations are. You need to come to them with at least three examples of what's going wrong. If you come to them with one example, they're going to dismiss it or rationalize it. You come with two, they're going to basically, kind of just, make excuses. You come with three, they kind of got them. So the idea there is you got to come with at least three examples of what they're doing wrong. And then you got to set the proper expectations. And then 30 days later, you need to come back for a strike two meeting. Now, if they fix the problem, you need to reward them for that and thank them for that. If they haven't, you need them to come back with three examples that basically explain why they're not living up to the expectations. Typically, what will happen is that you won't get to a three strike conversation. They'll probably quit. But the idea there is that that three strike rule is extremely important, right? Because it sets forth that, hey, this is not going to be accepted. We need you to perform at this level. If you're not, that's not good for us. It's not good for you, and it's not good for the company. Okay. So again, this is a quote from Napoleon. No amount of money will induce someone to lay down their life, but they will gladly do so for a bit of ribbon. Okay. Think of our military people. They get awards, they get medals. They're not compensated extremely high for what they do to defend our country. They do it to get a medal, right, and a ribbon. So think about that, right? So the idea there is that it's not always about money. Sometimes it's about recognition, and you got to make sure that you're rewarding and recognizing. So again, yes or no, am I rewarding and recognizing? And that's actually going to be yes or no. Again, all or nothing. If you have 5 employees, and you're doing it for 4 of them, it's a yeah, it's a no. If you're doing it for all 5, it's a yes. So again, if you have no's, it's very common to have no's. If you have no's, the idea there is that we want to turn those no's into yeses. There is a book that you can read that actually helps you with that. And one is it's called How to Be a Great Boss by Gino Wickman and Renee Boyer. Happy to send a copy to anybody who wants one. Just email me. Happy to do it. And again, to kind of put a full circle, a full ribbon on this. So again, leadership plus management equals accountability. Leadership, again, is working on the business, providing clear direction, creating the opening, initiative and thinking. Management is working in the business, providing clear expectations, communication, follow through, and doing. So again, management or leadership plus management equals accountability. And the goal here is that if you do that, you're going to hold people accountable. You're going to create a better team. And the goal here is that that's going to help you get what you want. So the idea there is that if you want what's on the left, which is the high tune NASCAR grass cutting machine versus the bubble making machine that little kids use. Again, I'm assuming you want what's on the left. And in order to do that, you need to become a better leader and a manager to actually get people held accountable to it. So, are there any questions, Tracy, that we need to go through?
We don't have any questions entered yet, but if you do have questions, please feel free to use the question and answer options that are down at the bottom of your screen there. And it should be in your Zoom webinar tools. And I've been launching some polls along the way, and we've got, some really cool people have been pretty mixed in terms of the yeses and the nos along the way on these self-assessments. And I love the transparency and the honesty. I don't know about everyone listening, but I know that a couple of these things really felt very pointed at me personally, because I think what I really noticed is that we are the most accountable for the success of our employees because of that leadership plus management, right? And like you said, you have to look in the mirror first before you point fingers at anybody else and make sure that you're driving their excellence and providing an opportunity for their excellence. I personally know that I let go of the vine very uh, hesitantly, reluctantly. And so that monkey one really got to me, Joe.
Well, and it's hard. It's scary to let go of the vine, right? Because when you're letting go, that's hard because you may have but the challenge is that holding on to it just slows the company down, right? If you think about it, there's a lot of owners that still do things that they shouldn't be doing, and it's holding them back, right? And I think that that's part of the exercise is saying, hey, there's a point where you should be working on high impact, very important things for the business versus you know, make sure the bathrooms are cleaned or the light bulbs are changed, right? Somebody
Right.
else should be responsible for that. And I hear that a lot. And there's a lot of head trash around it, right? Is that, well, it's easier for me to do it myself, right? And the goal there is that if you can get 80% of the way there, I'll give you an example. I'm going to pick on my kids. Part of this is actually letting go of the vine and saying, hey, you know what? Obviously our kids, my kids, I'm going to pick on them a little bit, but we asked them when they were younger to put away the dishes, right, from the dishwasher. And so as part of this is head trash saying I'm a process guy, right? So for me, I like to take something out of the dishwasher and put it right away, put it where it needs to go right away, right? One step. My kids though would take everything out of the dishwasher and eventually they would put it away. Right. Two different processes, the same results there, right? So the idea there is that sometimes people have a different process to get something done that doesn't necessarily make it wrong. It just makes it different. And if
For
we
sure.
want to train people on how we think it should be done, sometimes they have a different aptitude or a different ability. They may do it a lot better than we do it, right? Because of their knowledge and their experience, right? And the idea there is that we a lot of head trash around that delegate and elevate for sure.
Oh, for sure. We have a couple questions filing in. One is, how do people get more information on EOS if they want to integrate it into their business? And related to that, how much time should EOS take relative to the amount of time it takes to deliver the core product of the business? So how much time
Yeah.
should you spend working on it versus working in it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So on it should be at least quarterly. And the goal there is that in EOS we create what's called a meeting pulse. That looks at, so the idea there is that we create quarterly meetings every 90 days. And we do a 2-day annual, so 5 days a week or 5 days a year that we're working on the business at a minimum. Then the weekly meeting pulse is the level 10 meeting, that is a level 10 meeting within the leadership team. So that's every week for 90 minutes. That 90 minutes is actually about making sure that you're connected as a team, you're working through your scorecard, your rocks are on track, checking on your customer and employees, and then you should be IDSing or solving your issues at the root for at least 60 minutes of that 90-minute meeting. And most meetings within most companies are a waste of time because they're report out meetings, right? At the end of the day, we should be solving the issues at the root, making sure they go away forever. So it's not a heavy lift, but the idea there is it's really about making sure that everybody's on the same page and working towards the same goals. Because sometimes what happens is about 90 days into it, and I see this from some of my clients, is that they start to fray, right? They start to lose focus as to what's important. What this does is every 90 days allows you to get back on the same page to make sure that you understand what's important. It lets you go back into business and execute. So that's the
Absolutely.
execution phase.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think this is a muscle, and the more you use it, the better you get at it, the less time it takes to spend on it versus in it.
Correct.
But so maybe there's a front loaded period where you might have a little more
There
time to
is.
get
So
it.
yeah, there is a front-loaded period where, so the one thing is that if there's no discipline and accountability, we're trying to create that, right? So it's traction first. And then the idea there is that we're not going to create the common vision that then is going to be executed upon. That takes 3 days of work, right? And obviously some homework, things like that. So in the beginning of an EOS implementation, there is a process to get you there because if you go into a room and ask the executives what the vision is, you're probably going to get 6 or 7 different answers. The goal is by the end of the third day, or what we call vision building day two, everybody's on the same page with where they're going and how they're going to get there, right? Then that creates that execution phase, which is that 90-day world we're trying to create.
Absolutely. All righty. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much, Joe, for sharing this. This was inspirational. And for everyone who showed up live and was very involved in taking our polls. And yes, Joe, thank you for putting up your contact information. There are so many resources available through Joe and in the EOS world. So I encourage everybody
Yeah,
here
here's
to
here's a QR code if you guys
deep
want to
dive.
take the QR code and just at the end of the day, I'm here to help. If there's somebody that has a question about anything they're struggling with, all the tools that we teach are designed to deal with business issues, right? And the goal of that is actually to get to a point where you're dealing with business issues and make sure they go away forever. So I want to leave on this. One of the things and this is a question that I think resonates. What's one leadership or management practice that creates the biggest ripple effect or the fastest, right? That was a question you asked me, Tracy.
Yes.
The biggest thing that I would say on this is having tough conversations.
Mm,
Most organizations, more issues don't start as big problems. They start as small issues that nobody addresses. Okay. And it could be a miscommitment between becomes a pattern, a behavior issue becomes part of a culture, a poor performer drains the entire team, right? So leaders often thinks that being kind, avoiding difficult conversations is the right thing to do. In reality, what they're doing is they're extending the pain for everybody involved, right? And the idea there is so the greatest gift as a leader is to give clarity. Okay. The idea there is that even if you realize that you make a decision and it's wrong, the idea there is that you should be able to fix it, right? Because you're responsible for your issues, right? So when leaders address issues quickly, people know where they stand, accountability increases, trust grows, and obviously performance improves. The goal here is that one conversation can change a person, one avoided conversation can damage a culture. So the idea here is that you have to become responsible and have those tough conversations and have them quickly. I always tell people whatever you tolerate, you endorse.
Mhm.
If you're tolerating something, you're endorsing it. And by tolerating it, you're letting things go. And what happens is people see that within the organization and they think that that behavior or that action or whatever's happening is acceptable. And now instead of having one person doing it, now you got 10 people doing it. And now it
This is
becomes a
so
trickle
true.
effect.
Yes. Oh, and on that note, that is a perfect wrap up for all of this accountability stuff for ourselves and for our employees and teams. So look for the recording. I will share out the workbook again if you didn't have that open while we were going along. And thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you so much to our attendees for coming. And please reach out to Joe if you have any further
Yeah, I'm happy to
questions or
help.
needs.
If you want a traction book, let me know. I'm happy to send you one. Just send me your address, and I will ask you if you get a book that I want to actually hear what your thoughts are after you read the first chapter. So
It's a life-changing book. So yeah, definitely take Joe up on that offer. That is a very good one. All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Joe.
thanks, Tracy.
Take care.